So for the third step of our small tutorial, we will try to connect this RESTful controller to an actual database. So first thing we have to do is to create Java class in the package model. So we select model and we will create a class called, actually it's an interface. So, and we will call it people repository. So the repository is a class that gives you access to the database, and we will see which actual tables it accesses to. So this interface will extend, and let me zoom in. So maybe, yeah, zoom in a bit. So extends, an interface that Spring provides, which is CRUD repository. Okay, so CRUD repository is a parametric interface that takes the first type parameter is the entity that is actually mapped onto the database. The second one is the identifier of that entity. Okay, and we actually don't have to do anything else. So an empty interface will be enough to connect to the database. Spring, when it actually loads, will provide an implementation for people repository, and we will see in a minute that it already provides a bunch of useful methods. Okay, the first thing we have to do to make this okay is to say that class person is actually an entity of the database. So we do this, and again, we are using the same class for the return methods on the controller, and it doesn't have to be this way. So the first thing is just to say this is an entity, and entity is an annotation from Java persistence. So JPA, Java persistence package. Okay, and this is enough. We can go out and see if no errors were introduced. So if it compiles, then it should be okay. No, we have an error. And I think I know, but no identifier is specified for the entity person. Okay, so we are H2, which is a relational database. So every table must have a primary key. In this case, we identify primary key with the annotation ID from JavaX persistence package. Okay, this should be okay now. Let's see. Okay, everything is fine. So now to connect the repository to the controller. As we saw on one of the lectures, we have to make a dependency. So let's create a field here. Let's call it people, okay, repository, but instead of having a constructor and explicitly building the dependency, we will use auto-wired. Remember that all of these classes are on a package, on the same package as the Spring app or beneath it. Okay, so recall that Spring Boot application is an annotation that stands for, and if you can see it on your IDE by exploring it. Okay, particularly it has the component scan annotation, and that component scan annotation just declares where the beans are searched for. Okay, you can customize it, of course, but if you follow convention, then having all the beans beneath the Spring Boot application will be fine. So in this case, people is already a repository. So let's do this and replace the empty list by find all. Find all is a method that basically the database fetches all the records and returns an iterable of the type given as a type parameter for the repository. Okay, so in this case we already have one. Let's test it. Takes a while. Okay, so we should have a get requests on people, and the answer we have back is the empty list. Of course, the database is empty, but no errors were actually fired. So instead of having here a print, what we want to do is to save a new person to the database. As simple as this. Okay. Of course, we may want to check if the ID of the person we are inserting is already on this database, but we can actually do that in another way, just by declaring that the ID is sequential and then whatever this object is ignored. So let's try this one. Okay. If now we have a post to that people URL, and basically we already have here a person in the body. If we send it, okay, and then if we try and execute the get, you'll get a list with that particular person. Let's try a new one. So if we just insert with the same ID, it will have an error. So, but if we simply insert Jane Doe, okay, and then to get, we have two. Okay, it works. As long as we don't stop the server, the database is kept alive. So let's complete the other methods. In this case, we don't have to return a particular person, but the person that is on the database and is given by the method find by ID. So the thing is, find by ID returns an optional. So let's change just the return type of get one to optional person. So you can detect if it actually exists or not in a safe way, not just by testing if the result is null. Okay, so again, the update should be something like this. So you just test if the ID is the same, and you are updating things. So we probably want to find the record people find by ID and use the ID, get the person back. Oh, actually it's the old P. Let's use some like this. So we have a person back, and this is an optional. So optional. Okay. and then Alt P, we want to do get or check if it's present. Okay, so if Alt P is present, then, well, people dot save and P, so we'll directly override everything. We could have another behavior, but we can then do something with it's not. So if it's not present, so we have an error. We have so it's again a 404 error. So it's not found. Again, we are not dealing with this right now. So let's, and of course we can implement delete, and delete is just having this. So we get an object from the database, and if it's, let's try and of course if it's not there, it's a, if it is there, okay. So all so we have delete, and we need the person, and the person is op dot get. Okay, so let's test this interface. And we are almost on 12 minutes. Okay, so we should probably do a get, which means it's an empty list, a post, and a post, it's, if we have the header, okay, we will insert Jane Doe. Let's see. Okay, Jane Doe is on the list. If we do a put on Jane Doe is 112, right? So on the body, we John Mary. Okay, we can update it. And okay, so if we do it, we get on that ID, and it was updated. And of course, we can do a delete on that same one. And if we do a get list, we will have the empty list. So it should work. It is working. Okay. So this concludes the third step to connect to a database. So H2 is in memory. It's just represented by this interface in the Spring program. So next we will see how to do a more complex query in this repository.